So thank you everyone for joining. Welcome to another session of the Growth Clinic. I'm Jared Flagel, Director of Marketing here at One Mechanics, here with our co-founder, CEO, Fearless Leader, Chris Mechanic. Growth Clinic is a community event we put on every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, all about solving our toughest growth and marketing challenges. So every week we'll spend 50% of the time interviewing Chris about a particular topic around growth and marketing. And then the second half, we'll break into Q&A and answer your questions. So yeah, without further ado, Chris, today's topic is all about the LinkedIn algorithm, and specifically, how can we hack the LinkedIn algorithm, particularly the organic news feed, to build our brand, whether it's building our professional brand, marketing our company, or even ultimately generating leads. You wrote an epic guide back in 2017 all about how you can do this on LinkedIn and why there's this big opportunity on LinkedIn right now, at least in 2017. Catch us up to speed. Talk to us a little bit about sort of the overall premise of that guide, what's changed since 2022, and why is now still a good time to be posting on LinkedIn.
Yep. Let's talk LinkedIn. I love talking LinkedIn. I was completely obsessed with LinkedIn, basically from 2016 to 2017, and built up quite a following. So I went from probably about 1,000 followers to maybe like 6,000 or 7,000 over just the course of a few months, as I was like obsessively kind of testing and figuring stuff out. It was an amazing time back then. Like, there was nobody really on it. And LinkedIn had redesigned their whole platform to be more like Facebook and to have that news feed front and center. And it was almost like there was nobody posting except Gary Vee. So it was the ultimate arbitrage opportunity where you just had so many eyeballs that were looking for content and nobody really publishing. So back in the heyday, 2016, 2017, LinkedIn was a lot easier than it is today, just the same way that SEO and Google Ads and those things were all much easier and less competitive in their early phases. But it is still a great time to post. It's just free traffic. It's just arbitrage. And literally, like, if you post, even if it's the worst post ever, it's going to get views. Like, somebody's going to see it, right? And we're paying for views on all of these other platforms. So if you're in B2B and you're not on LinkedIn, I would say, hey, what are you doing? It's free traffic. Like, let's go out and get it. So it's still a good time. And that's the reason why, because it still, provides those organic, those free eyeballs, click-throughs, it's awareness. Even though it's maybe not as dramatic as it was before, it's still there. The rules have changed, I think, quite a bit since then. I'd fallen out of it for a good while, like in 2019, 2020. I was pretty quiet on there. I've started back up, and I've learned, things are definitely not the way that they used to be. Like, there's some distinct differences, which we'll get into now. But I would say, if you're not on LinkedIn, you absolutely should be. If you're a B2B or a B2G or a B2 nonprofit or a B2EDU, or if your audience is on LinkedIn, you should absolutely be on there. And there's a few ways that we'll talk about to get your organizations posting. Like, I think for a B2B, one of the best little hacks, which we're doing here at Web Mechanics to an extent, but get other people within your organization, particularly like the ones that are more senior level or more well-known or just naturally have more connections. Like, if you can just simply get a group of your colleagues or your executives posting, even if it's just once a week, it's like massive in terms of awareness. And what you'll see is that you're not going to get like a huge number of conversions, like you're not going to get a huge number of leads, but like almost immediately, even now with my more modest stats, like almost immediately when I post something, like I'll get DMs or people will mention it. Like, I'll be on an internal call or in a client call, and people will mention, oh, hey, I saw your post. So you're getting a lot more actual views, and it's having more impact than what meets the eye, especially in your closest communities. So when you can have a group of different executives from within your company, say like the leaders of each division or something like that, if you can deliver to them some basic training and then get a commitment from them, basically just to simply post, that's just a really good habit, I think, to get into. And there's a lot more that we could say about it, but but I love when I see companies do that. You see Gong doing that. You see Lemlist doing that. You see some of these kind of really high growth companies just dominating on LinkedIn, and that's part of what they're doing is they're getting internal people to also champion the LinkedIn cause.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So Chris, take us through the post. So it sounds like the post is kind of the core of this, like getting these posts into our LinkedIn feed to get in front of people who are on LinkedIn organically. How do we craft that post that gets those likes, shares, and comments? What does that process look like?
Yeah. So when you go to craft a post on LinkedIn, of course you want to make it interesting, right? You don't want to make it boring. You don't want to make it all about you. You want to have, some consideration of the audience that you're going after, and you want to, generally make it an interesting post. But the first line or two, like the first, say, 180 characters or so of post text in that image, if it's a text-based post, are definitely the most important. Like you should treat those first, 100 to 200 characters as basically the same way you would treat a subject line in an email, or the same way you would treat a headline in a landing page. Like you want to hook that reader in first and foremost. So a lot of times, like if I'm spending 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, or sometimes I'll spend even longer writing a post, I put a lot of thought into usually the first few, the opening part of that. So that's always been tried and true. The reason that works is because when people click on that see more and they spend time with that post, they call it dwell time. It's definitely a significant factor in that algorithm. So first off, make the post interesting. Second off, make double sure that there's a good hook at the beginning of that post.
Got it. So basically, interesting, unique content plus a hook, right, is what's going to get people engaging.
Yep.
Yep, makes sense.
Now, anytime LinkedIn launches anything new, you should pay special attention to it, because a lot of times the new media formats or the new post types or the new features in general are oftentimes algorithmically preferred. Like you see that with surveys. Like I'll do a post and I might get, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 engagements, but you can run a survey and get like thousands of engagements, right? And I think there's a few reasons for that. I think I have a hypothesis on what LinkedIn is trying to do with those surveys and how you can really get surveys that get massive distribution. But that's an example of a new feature. Now, it doesn't always work out. I remember they at some point launched a stories feature. It was very similar to stories. And I remember doing a few, and it just got like absolutely no like it was like, pitiful levels of distribution, like something like 7 views or 10 views or something. And they've since, I think, removed that feature. I haven't seen the stories feature at all. So it's not always, a winner, but in general, anytime there's something new that you have the ability to do, like creator mode, like they introduced creator mode not too long ago, chances are you're going to get some algorithmic preferential algorithmic treatment from activating that creator mode and from building out your profile and spending time there on LinkedIn. With surveys, I think what LinkedIn is trying to do is to become a hub of market research. So if you're writing a survey, like my tendency usually is to look at what's happening in my experience and then write a survey about that I really want to know the answer to a question, such as like, I'm really struggling, like, is Slack actually productive, or is it actually makes you less productive? So that was something that I, personally was just wondering, and I put it up as a post, but it worked really well. And I think the reason that it worked is because it's a question that might be in a research report. So if you think about, think about your audience, and if they were reading a research report, like what questions would make a really interesting research report to them, and then write that question as such where the answers will be quite useful to that reader.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. That really is kind of a hack, right? Because you're like reading LinkedIn's mind, trying to figure out like what do they want, and then you're giving it to them. That's really cool. So in terms of So what are some other elements that might, help us with LinkedIn, like our LinkedIn profile, for example? Like, is there anything we can do with that to, boost our engagement or engage the right folks? Or what are your thoughts on optimizing our LinkedIn profile for this process?
Yeah, so LinkedIn profiles you should almost look at with your SEO hat on. So think in terms of contextual relevancy. So for me, I'm a marketer. So basically you want your profile, like the keywords that you're using within your actual bio, the skills that you're listing, the groups that you're a member of, like you want them to be coherent. And the reason for that is a couple fold, but it's largely so that you have a higher chance of entering into the ecospheres of your prospects and also appearing on search results pages within LinkedIn. Because a lot of people don't necessarily think of LinkedIn as a search engine, but people do use LinkedIn to actually just source talent. Like people will search for, like, say you need a PPC manager, people will search PPC manager in people, right? So if you want to show up, any types of searches that you want to show up for, you should kind of SEO optimize your profile for it. And in a similar view, you should look at the profiles of your prospects, whoever it is that you want to get in touch with, or that you want, or that you hope will see your posts. Look at their profiles and study them like an SEO would study them. Like, what relevancy signals or what contextual signals is that individual sending to LinkedIn via their profile? Like, if you look at 10 prospects, are there certain groups that they all have in common? Are there certain skills that they all have in common? Or is there certain types of language, certain connections that they have in common? So you want to look at those common threads so that you can formulate your own basically content strategy according to the interests and the skills and the groups that your prospects are in.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So basically, the LinkedIn profile helps us get found once we optimize it, and also it allows us to kind of blend into the world of the types of folks that we want to get in front of, right? Like, and train LinkedIn to help us put us in that category, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is just coming into my mind right now, but one really interesting piece of real estate on your LinkedIn profile is, I guess, I don't know what it's called, but maybe your tagline, but it's the thing that shows up in the preview card. So in like the other people that you might know section, it'll say your name and it'll show one other piece of text. I don't know what they call it, either the heading or the tagline or what have you.
Or something, yeah.
But most people put their position there. Most people say, myself included, co-founder of Web Mechanics or sales at such and such a company. But if you think about real estate and like web real estate in the context of how you would think about like an email or a landing page, where with an email the subject line is most important, with the landing page the headline is the most important. That tagline right under your name is probably like a really important optimization point. And it would be cool if you could run different taglines and somehow measure like how your click-through rates or how your profile views trend. I can't think of a way to isolate that and measure it separately, but you might want to revisit that tagline and think about it like, hey, if this were in a big list, like on the search results page, they're searching for PPC managers, and this is in a big list with other PPC managers, what might you include as a hook? Like emojis come to mind, right? But those are kind of played out. And there's different ways to use emojis. So one emoji combination might work better than another emoji combination. But right after we get off this call, I think I'm going to go and test out a different tagline.
Yeah, me too. I think it's time for me to test mine too. But that's cool. So that's like essentially another hook, right? Like, so on LinkedIn, it seems like we're looking for these different hooks or areas where we can capture our audience's attention. Like our headline or tagline is one, our posts, like the top of our posts is another. So there's something interesting. There's definitely something to that. Like we want to find those different hook points, if you will, to get people engaged. I guess outside of our profile and our posting. So say we're posting like 3, 4, 5 times a week. We've got our LinkedIn profile down pat. We're testing our tagline. We're trying to figure out what works there. What else can we be doing outside of that to get the right folks engaging with us? Like what other activities can we be doing on LinkedIn to accomplish that?
Well, now that I'm on this thought train of like optimization points, I think the profile picture seems worthy of a mention.
Mhm.
Most people just do pretty simple headshots. I think that if you're thinking about, optimizing for click-through rate on a search engine results page, if you've got, a bunch of headshots, but yours looks different, then it's going to draw the eye, right? So if instead of your typical background, which may be, it may be whatever it is, but if you made your whole background like bright yellow, for instance, it's going to draw the eye. Um, so you might want to think also about your profile picture itself, not necessarily changing the image, but applying some treatment to the image so that in that, other people you may know, it's like you're going to get that click probably most times if you're bright fluorescent yellow and everybody else is, blending in into the page. Similarly, the image that you are allowed to use as your hero image. Like there's, that's a great place to deliver a value prop or like a really crisp and clean USP or unique selling proposition that really cuts through the noise that you don't see a lot of people doing, including myself, so I'm sleeping on that. I need to go probably make my profile picture yellow and update my hero image and my tagline all at once. I might just do that and keep everything else consistent and see if I get more views from search. I'm almost certain that you would.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that I think is cool about LinkedIn right now is like, because we are able to get this essentially first party data back on our own profiles, there are so many different things we can tweak and optimize and get like a result on, right? So yeah, I think that's one of the things that's really exciting about it. I'm curious, like, so say we're starting to build a following, right? So say we've done these things, we're starting to see our post views trending up, people are starting to follow us, connect with us. How do we say our goal is ultimately marketing, right? We want to generate leads, we want to, help our company grow. How do we make that transition from building our brand and building our presence to turning that into a lead generating engine? Like, what are those steps?
So it's a good question. I think, though, to go from building brand awareness to generating leads on LinkedIn is definitely possible, but it's definitely tricky because the ethos of LinkedIn is such that like everybody kind of knows you're there to do business. Everybody's kind of reluctant to listen to a pitch.
Mhm.
So basically, like the way to not do it is just to like send a bunch of connect requests and have a message automatically sent, right?
Mhm.
I think the way to do it is like a quality over quantity approach, where think about almost like a micro ABM campaign. So you've got obviously a universe of 1,000 prospects or more. Who are your like 5 or 10 best prospects that you really, really, really want to get into? And then who are a few influencers of that sale? And I would basically just start interacting with their posts because most people, when they post something, they're watching the response rates and they're, getting the comment notifications and stuff. So, like, you can literally get into the LinkedIn inbox of your dream come true prospects, uh, you know, very easily just by simply commenting on their posts. And like you will show up, you won't be marked as spam, you won't be blocked by their inbox filters. You'll legit show up right there in their notifications. And I have people that have targeted me in this way that I've ended up doing business with or hiring for a job or something, just because after a while, like EJ White. It's like EJ White comment on your post. If I'm just like EJ White, I'm seeing his name over and over again. Okay, who's this EJ White that keeps? So I'll go check him out and be like, okay, EJ White. And then if it goes from something real subtle like or a heart or whatever to something a little bit more personal, just like a short note. To then progressively kind of like more and more thoughtful commentary being left on their posts, there's no way they're not going to notice you, and as long as you're not being an asshole, they're not going to hate you, they're not going to think of you as being a spammer or as trying to cross that line from socializing to doing business. But they're going to know you, and then they'll be more receptive to a direct message or to an email message or things like that. So I think the game on LinkedIn is more so whale hunting when it comes to like the direct prospecting efforts. But you would be surprised also that like you will get leads and you will get prospects, like even if you don't try. Like if you're putting out useful content and it's relevant and it's, you know, fairly consistent, other people are going to see you, start following you, and eventually reach out. um, we have had success with these types of posts that kind of dangle an offer or dangle an asset of some sort, and it's like, hey, if you want this, comment yes. Those can work, and they can, I mean, they tend to work quite well actually as a way to bridge that gap from just, you know, pure brand awareness to more of the prospecting phase. But the thing that a lot of people don't realize about that is, in the event that it does work, following up and closing the loop and, you know, kind of maximizing the value of those opportunities is a whole nother beast, right? So back in I learned this lesson back in 2017 because I had this one epic post that was about LinkedIn, and it was promising the guide, and there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that commented yes. And I wasn't ready for it. Like, we did not have the system in place to properly follow up with that. So we ended up basically just scrambling and sending everybody the link, you know, and it took us half a day probably to send everybody the link without really looking and seeing like, hey, is this a good prospect? Or like, let's put them on a list, or let's follow up with them in this special way. So I would say that if you are doing some of those, like, hey, drop a comment to get this prize, think about the back end of that and how, you know, you plan to follow up on it before you post.
Yeah. I know also, just taking, like, going back to what you said a second ago in terms of like commenting and interacting with other users and using that as like a more personal, like, kind of lead gen tactic. I know that that was fairly successful. At least my perception was that that was fairly successful with that survey that we did, that you guys did back in the day. I think it was like Nicole was in charge of it, where you guys hired someone, worked with someone to kind of create a system where you could post on people's walls. And I thought that was incredibly unique in that, you know, if somebody were to post a comment on my wall on LinkedIn, like, I'm going to see it 100% of the time, and I'm going to consider it, because, like, you know, the inbox in mail, okay, yeah, I might ignore that, or I might say, no, I don't want to hear from this person. Or if it's like an offer, I'm much more likely to just ignore it. But like, somebody takes the time, at least seemingly takes the time, to, like, you know, comment something on my wall, and then it's something that's like a value add to me, not necessarily just like, you know, wanting me to buy something straight up. I don't know exactly what the metrics were on that, but I could imagine that they were pretty good, I would think, you know, in terms of that approach. Just kind of going back more generally, anybody who comments on my post, I'm going to see that, you know, people engaging, commenting on something I posted, or posting on my, you know, tagging me in a post or anything like that. You know, you're going to see 100% of those, because unless you're a celebrity, most people aren't getting, you know, those tags in a volume where it's going to be drowned out. You're going to be like, oh, wow, why did this person tag me? What is it? What do they have to say? So you're at least going to get that awareness, if absolutely nothing else.
Yeah. It's like really easy way, you know, to get somebody's attention.
So Chris, so I love that idea of basically focusing on the long game, right? You know, take your time, build relationships with people, and a lot of it'll just come inbound. But there are some ways to kind of stoke that fire a little bit, which is good to know too, and get people engaging. What are some other mistakes? So you mentioned, like, basically connecting with people and bitch slapping, which we obviously don't want to do on LinkedIn 2022 anymore. But what are some other mistakes you see folks on LinkedIn making, whether it's with their posts or their content or how they're engaging with folks? What are, I guess, some traps to avoid when you're going about this journey of building your presence on LinkedIn?
So I'm going to address that in 1 second. But you want to know a really cool little LinkedIn formula is to run a survey. So on LinkedIn, similar to Twitter, you can basically @tag anybody and appear in their newsfeed. So we one time did a pretty sizable exercise where we found a whole bunch of good prospects. We went and tagged them, basically saying, hey, you're a mover and a shaker. We're doing this survey on such and such a topic. The topic that you choose is important. On such and such a topic, we would love to have your input on it. And oh, by the way, you'll be the first to get the results. And oh, by the way, one participant will win this cool thing. I think we were giving away an Oculus.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So the total cost of it was basically an Oculus plus time. And we went around. I think we did a total of 1,000 or 2,000 pings like that, and we got 200 responses. And this was not a short survey. This was like a long form, like multi-part survey. So we got incredible data that we basically used to create this epic content piece. But we also, as part of the step in that process, said, hey, are you open to a conversation? So toward the end of that survey, it was like, hey, we are in the business of digital marketing. Like, are you open to a conversation about that? And a few dozen surprisingly answered yes, and then became basically sales appointments for us. So it was definitely work. It cost about $1,000 to give that Oculus away plus time, but the output was this epic piece of content plus like close to 30 sales meetings, some of which closed the deals. So it was a fantastic return on investment. And I think the whole thing took like a couple months. So there you go. Do your own survey on LinkedIn. Epic content, lots of leads for your database, and actually some sales appointments right there on LinkedIn without being salesy.
Love it. It's brilliant. Yeah. Yeah, I guess outside of that, that's an amazing tactic. Chris, I think we should try that again. Are there any other things you see folks doing? It's back to the mistakes question. Like, are there any things that folks are doing that you see on LinkedIn that you're like, maybe don't do that, or that isn't working, or things that people do that don't really work that they should maybe not do and try the other things instead?
I think the biggest mistake that people make on LinkedIn is they give up really easily. Like they'll get enthusiastic and they'll write a post or two. I'm guilty of this myself. Like I go in waves. I'm not going to pretend I'm the best and the baddest in the world. But I think that's the main mistake that people make, is failing to be consistent, maybe getting discouraged a little bit earlier, or maybe just getting distracted and not focused. I believe that you really need to like identify one or two main social platforms and kind of invest in them. I think some people try to use LinkedIn as basically just like, hey, I'll connect it with my, social media tool and I'll just post simultaneously across all three. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but I think that if you really want to build up a following and a community on LinkedIn, you have to commit to remaining consistent to it. And I know that that's much easier said than done. But start small if you need to. Like one post a week. Of course, you could start with that one post a week. But if you're posting and you're following a set of guidelines like the ones that we laid out in 2017, many of which are still quite valid, then like it will grow. You absolutely will. Like if you do that over the course of time, you'll find that your views and your engagements will just slowly but steadily grow. And then a lot of times there's like this breakout point. There's like one post that you'll have, and this has happened to me a couple times, and it's like super exciting, but there's this one post that like you don't really think it's necessarily going to do that well, but it just flies. And at that point, that's when you can really start to grow much quicker, because as a result of that post, you now have a lot of people's eyeballs. So when you have like a really strong post that does better than you think it will, post again, like frequently thereafter, like keep that momentum going and that momentum rolling. And that's what happened to me back in, so 2017, I was obsessed. 2018, I kind of lost interest. 2019, 2020, I kind of started coming back. Whereas before I used to get like 100 or more pretty frequently. I haven't yet hit my breakout, but I'm staying with it. And one of these posts will be a breakout. And at that point, I'll be like, I'm back.
Nice. It'll happen, Chris. Yeah, I'm feeling the momentum. Yeah, it'll come back. I love it. Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. I guess so lots changed in 5 years. We covered that. What do you think the future of LinkedIn is going to look like? Like what's going to change in the next 1, 3, 5 years, and where do you see it going?
Unfortunately, I think LinkedIn is basically going to continue trying to copy Facebook and Insta and TikTok. Like I know that Reels is probably going to be introduced soon. So basically just like look at Facebook and Insta and the other platforms. But one thing that will definitely change and be upgraded is from the ad side of things, because the ad platform, like just knowing, having worked in the different platforms, the ad platform is just really in need of a makeover. It's just difficult to, to do much of anything in there. But I think that more and more, the distribution is gonna be harder to get, because there's a fixed number of eyeballs. I mean, the number of eyeballs may be growing incrementally, but as the number of creators grows and grows, it's going to be, more and more competition to get those eyeballs. So I think the time to get started really is right now. Just carve your niche out right now, so that at least you can have that core group of following, as your baseline for growth. What else is going to change? What else do you think is going to change in the future of LinkedIn? I think we'll see more formats, like more ad formats. We may very well see different features, like new features added to profiles. I don't know what else will change.
Yeah, I'm interested to see, how the integration between LinkedIn and Microsoft's ad platform evolves, right? Like, will there be a point where we can seamlessly target folks on search, that meet certain, firmographic or demographic criteria on LinkedIn, right? Like, wouldn't it be cool if instead of targeting anybody who searches for a keyword, you're just targeting folks who search that are on your target account list, right? And presumably Microsoft would know that because they own LinkedIn, right? So they have access to all their data, right? So they could potentially, if they wanted to, carve out a niche for themselves as a go-to for B2B advertising, right? Because they're able to have that level of precision and targeting across all their different media outlets that just isn't available on other platforms. So,
wow. So when Microsoft Ads merges its data infrastructure with LinkedIn Ads, Bing will become the de facto for B2B marketers.
Perhaps we shall see.
That's Jared Flagle's prediction, ladies and gentlemen. Jared Flagle for the win.
Any other final thoughts on LinkedIn or things marketers should do to get started with it?
I really, really think, and I'll just re-emphasize because the last clip might have been a little clunky, but I really, really think there's a huge opportunities for B2Bs to round up a group of executives, or it doesn't need to be C-levels, it could even be directors, but just imagine the power. Let's say you could wave a magic wand and get 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 of your executive level people to commit to a LinkedIn habit, even if it's just 1 hour a week, right? You bring in someone like me to train them in the course of a few sessions about, the different post types, how to use them, the importance of variety, how to come up with content topics, how the algorithm works, and how you can kind of give yourself a head start. And then you just start this process weekly. I mean, if you could do it more frequently, it would be good. But if you get that started and you commit to it, like, it will snowball. Absolutely. Especially if there's an element of activity involved on the site, involved on LinkedIn beyond just posting. Like if you blend in little micro ABM campaigns, like into the daily, weekly, monthly rituals of the executives don't have to do it all themselves. I mean, it could be an admin or an intern or anybody that's going in and actually doing, punching the buttons. But if there's that formulaic approach, which is like content creation plus strategic engagement with like your tier 1 target accounts, like the cream of the crop target accounts that you really want with your executives, even the non-sales executives in there collaborating and feeding intel back to the sales team, like, man, that's powerful. And like almost nobody's doing it. Gong is like the example of that. Gong does it really well. Lemlist, if you look at my boy Guillaume, he is a badass on LinkedIn. He's the one kind of that taught me about that approach. But what G also said, which I thought was really insightful, because I oftentimes am like, what am I going to write about? How do you write? So the way that G puts it is basically to document the journey. Document your journey from wherever you are now to wherever you're going, and then include a twist or some kind of element that makes it valuable to the audience. I mean, that's a pretty surefire formula right there.
Yeah, love it. Document the journey. Tell your story. That's beautiful. Well, Chris, I think that's a wrap. Thank you for teaching us about LinkedIn and all the potential that's on there and what we can do to take advantage of it. For those of you who are watching, we're going to post a recording on YouTube, so you can check that out. We'll be sending it out via our email list next week. So if you're not on our email list, make sure you get on to get the latest episodes as they come out and get news about the growth clinics to come. So with that, thank you everybody for joining, and we will see you on the next one.